Hello, everybody. Good evening. So, we're on day 2 of our Sikukuu. I'm just going to double check a couple of things, make sure that we're all ready and prepared. Day 2 is going to be the exterior of the bag, and I will show you the exterior in a minute. I'm just going to make sure I connect my mic. Everybody can hear me. I can see your comments. It'll just be a lot of things going on. Hey, Miss Arnetta, welcome back to day 2. See, you're hanging out with me doing this. So just so that you know, if you did not prepare from day 1, that video is available. You can go back and see all the pieces and the cutting of it. And there was some explanation about some interfacing on there as well. And hopefully once you've watched that, you come back to day 2 and you're ready to begin. This will be on replay. So if you don't make it, a couple of things, make sure that we're that was me. So if you're here, you should have looked at day 1 or gone through the directions and cut out all of your pieces. So if you went through directions, cut out all the pieces, and you're ready to begin sewing, you're in the right place. So just want to introduce myself. My name is Catherine Maldonado, and I'm the owner, curator, founder of Sew Your Bag. The bag that we'll be doing tonight was a bag that was in one of the kits. So throughout, you may hear me reference the kit in some way or the box in some way because I have a subscription box. So this is the bag pattern that we're working on. The pattern is now available on the website if you just want to purchase the pattern. So let's get started. So for tonight, we will be working on this exterior piece of the bag. Hopefully everybody's getting a good visual on this, but the exterior will be this front and back piece, which we cut. It will also be this pop-up piece right here with the zipper closure. So it should be pretty quick tonight, or pretty simple, I should say. In addition, we will be constructing our straps in preparation for the lining, which will happen on day 3. So I just want to get a little bit more brightness on my cutting mat. Okay, so hopefully that's a little better. I didn't want to turn up my didn't want to turn on the big overhead light, so it wouldn't be like a beacon of hope or anything like that. So we're going to construct this. So let's talk about the different pieces, and we're going to talk about a couple of things as well, like cutting and what we're going to need to do. So we'll take that step by step. So I'm going to repeat for you exactly the pieces that you're going to need. So you will need your front and back. You will need your front and back pieces. I started with the cutout, but we'll talk about how we do that in a minute. You will need your zipper pieces, and that's for the top part of your bag. And you will need the lining and corresponding piece for that, along with the zipper. You'll need your strap anchors, or your strap connectors, or these chain connectors. And then you will need 4 tabs, which go to attach the strap to the bag. So that's these pieces here. Now, what I will mention to you is that I did interface the strap itself. So there is interfacing on the strap. And the reason I interface it is because I want some stiffness to it. I used regular woven interface. I actually used my own interface, which is DHL 2010. And I'll post a link to that as well. But let's talk about the construction of the strap first. Hey, Deborah. Is there static? Am I breaking up? I apologize. Hold on. Thank you for letting me know. Is that a little bit better? Thank you. So we're going to talk about the strap. So what did I do to prepare the strap? I interface the whole entire piece. So as you can see, there is interfacing on the entire piece, the full width. Then what I did is, because I wanted to have a finished edge on my strap, if I left it with this up and I folded it, I would have a raw edge. But instead, what I want my strap to look totally finished. So if you look at this strap, you can see right here, it is a finished edge. So according to the directions, you're going to fold over and iron both edges of your strap. So I did it for one end, and I also did it for this end as well. So you're going to fold over and iron. The exact measurements are in the pattern. Once you've done that and you've ironed it, the next thing you're going to do is you will be folding it to the center. And we really want to make our strap fit the anchor pieces. These anchor pieces, but the connector pieces. But right now, when I'm using them, your strap will be a little bit wider, and we will use those connectors so that they will fit those, those pieces. So once you've done that, you're going to then take your strap and you're going to fold it in half, just like this, and you're going to iron it the full length. I don't know what the static is. Hold on. And the static could be me. 1 second. Is that better? Sound-wise, is that better? Is that a little bit better? Hopefully it... No, it's not better. Okay. Okay. Deborah says yes. Arnetta says no. So I made a slight adjustment to my sound, and I repositioned my mic so my mic isn't directly underneath me, because maybe it was the brushing of my fabric. Thank you, Arnetta. Thank you, Deborah. Okay. So what we're going to do is, once you've done this, I'm going to fold it in half lengthwise, and I'm going to iron it. Once it's fully ironed the entire length, you're then going to open it up. You're going to take one long edge and you're going to fold it to the middle, to where that fold is. So you want to make sure that when you're ironing this, you're ironing very well, because you want to create a crease. The next thing you're going to do is you will fold the other side into the middle as well, so that the two sides match. You will iron it, and then as a final step, you will fold it in half again lengthwise, and you will iron it one last time so that your strap should measure 1 inch wide. So this will be a 1 inch wide strap. So I did that for the entire length of my strap. I'm now going to add some clips to hold it together, so when I go to the sewing machine. Okay, so once you've done that, you're going to set this to the side. You're going to do the same thing for your little tab pieces here, so you can see when you're done, right? The only difference is with the tab, you will not fold it under. So don't fold under the edges. You're just going to fold it in half once, open it up, fold one long edge to the middle, other long edge to the middle, and then fold it in half. So you'll have 2 raw edges on either side here, and these raw edges will get hidden in your bag itself. So you don't need to do that. So next what we're going to do is we're going to go to the sewing machine, and we're going to need to put some top stitching along both of the long edges here. And once we've done that, we will then construct our strap by adding these tabs with our anchors to our straps. So let's go to the sewing machine. Now I'm going to be using a 1/8 inch seam allowance and a stitch length of between 4 and 4.5. And I always say, please know your sewing machine, test it out, see what you like. A stitch length should be longer than a standard sewing length because it is kind of meant to be decorative in nature. So you want it to look really nice. I normally use a 4 on my machine, but once again, test your machine, see how long you like those stitches. And I will be using that 1/8 of an inch. And I want to make sure that it's even. So what I will do is I will sew along both edges. So I'm going to sew not only on the open end here, not only to close it, I will sew again on the other side. And I will do that for all 4 of my pieces. And I'm going to string them together. So I'm going to just sew one after the other. Now, I normally tell people that what they should do is you should sew the piece closed first. So sew it closed. So when it's open, sew this to close it up, and then sew this closed end next. The reason you do that is if for whatever reason you didn't have it exactly right when you stitched it on the closed end, it's a little bit harder to fix it on the side that you need to close up. So if it's closed, it's very easy to roll it between your fingers to get it to be totally even and correct. So I'm going to drop my presser foot. I will be using that 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. You will need to take a ruler and measure that for yourself on your sewing machine. On my sewing machine, the 1/8 of an inch is actually in here along this edge of my sewing machine, my presser foot. And so I'm just going to sew that. I'm then going to take the next piece. I did not cut the thread. Open end, I'm going to sew that first. Okay, so I'm going to flip it over, and next I'm going to sew the edge that's closed. And I didn't cut anything. I'll cut that. I'll clean it up when I get back to the cutting mat. Okay, so we're done. And I'm just going to clean this up. I'm just going to cut these threads to separate my tabs. And I'm going to set 2 of them to the side. So I need 2 of them right now, and the others 2 I'm going to set to the side for later. So next what we want to do is we want to add the tabs. We want to add these tabs to our connectors, our chain connectors, and to the strap. So we're going to add these to our strap and sew them in as we go. So to do that, what will happen is you'll open this up. So I don't want to take, and hopefully you can see that, I don't want to take my connector, my piece, and stick it to one side. So I don't want to stick it over here or, fold it in half and stick it to one side. What I want to do is I want to open this up, stick this on one side, one end on one side, fold it down, and then take the other end and fold it in on the other side. And that way it'll be even. Before I do that, I'm going to take my strap, my chain connectors, slip that in there. So this little tab piece, slip it in there. It should be the width. And I'm going to clip it. So that'll be one. And I'm going to take my other chain connector and do the same thing. I'm going to go back to the sewing machine, and I'm just going to base stitch this at 1/8 of an inch so I don't have to, oh, I'm sorry, I'm not going to base stitch it. I'm going to take my connector and I'm going to attach it here. So once again, it's in the connector. I'm going to take one end and stick it in one side. So I opened it up, I put it here. I'm then going to fold it over just like this. And try to center it between this short end. Take the connector, stick it right over there, close it, and this is a little fiddly, and then fold this down on the opposite side. And that way it's totally even and it's not all on one side. And then once you've done that, then you can clip it in place. So I'm just going to clip it to hold it because it's hard for me to do it on camera. But when you're doing it, you can pull it towards you and it'll be that much easier. Okay. Perfect. So now once I do that, leave at least 1/8 of an inch. So if you look at this, there should be a gap between the metal piece and here, about 1/8 or 1/4 of an inch. You want to leave that gap because you're going to need to lift your presser foot and rotate it. And you don't want your presser foot sitting on top of your hardware. So add a clip to hold this in place, just like that. And then I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. So once again, I'm going to open this up. I'm going to stick 1/2 on one side, just like that. I'm just going to add a clip for myself to hold it. And then take the other side, end and stick it on the other side. And then you can just push it down. Now, when we're going over this on the sewing machine, please take your time. If you have to hand crank it, then do so. It is thick, so you want to make sure that you don't break a needle. And I'm just evening it out. So now we have both of these sides, both of our chain connectors. As I start to stitch this, once again, I'm going to start with the open side and close it up. What I will do is I will start not at the very top here, but somewhere about maybe an inch or so down. I will stitch down, go all the way around, and then come back up and meet my stitches. Now, the reason that I do that is because it's hard to get in the corner. Also, this is the thicker part, so I want to start on a part that's not as thick. And when we sew that, you can see it here. All right, we're going to have 1/8 of an inch seam on both sides, and we will be closing it up. So let's go to the sewing machine. Once again, I am using a stitch length of 4, which is my top stitch length. Take your time when you're doing top stitching. You know, you don't have to go fast. Go as slow as you need to go because you want to keep it totally straight. I will say to you, I do not look at the needle as it goes up and down. I actually look more over here and it will go straight. And I hold it gently between my fingers and let my machine do the work. So I'm going to just put my needle down, make sure my thread is out of the way, and I'm going to start. Now, when you get to that corner, I have my needle in the down position. I'm going to turn my wheel. I'm going to turn my wheel, and when I turn the wheel, I want to make sure that needle is going up, and it is. I can then lift my presser foot, rotate 90 degrees, drop my presser foot. If you need to take an extra stitch or half a stitch to get to the corner so that you're 1/8 of an inch away, you can turn your stitch length down so that you are about either a 2 or 3, whatever you need to get to that corner. Now, as you go through this, remember I said it's thick, so take your time. And when you get to the other side, same thing, rotate your wheel so that the needle is going up. Lift your presser foot. And this is where I talked about make sure there's 1/8 of an inch because you want to try to not rest your presser foot completely on this because you don't want to scratch it as it moves. So I'm going to drop my presser foot. Slowly, I'm going to go down the other side. Once again, it is thick. When you get almost to the other side, remove that clip once again. Rotate your wheel so that it goes up. Lift your presser foot. Rotate 90 degrees. I'm not quite there. I don't know if you can see this, but as I rotate it, I'm not quite at the corner. So I'm going to turn it back. I'm going to drop my presser foot. I'm going to hand crank just till I get to that corner. If you need to, once again, make sure that you take a half a stitch. You can turn down your wheel. And then I'm where I need to be once I turn it. Take your time going across. Okay. And then once you get into that stitch, turn your wheel so that the needle's coming up. Lift your presser foot. Rotate one last time. Move your chain out of the way so you don't hit it. And then take your time coming back in the opposite direction. And I'm just hand cranking a little bit because I can hear it stall. There we go. And try to get back into those stitches. If you don't, that's okay. Nobody's going to really notice it. And then I will back tack. So now we're done. We've connected our strap connectors to both sides. So they're both connected. I am going to trim my little threads here that I have on both sides. And your strap connectors should be done. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add my other 2 tabs just to the end here, to the other side, in preparation for when I attach it to the bag. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing. We're going to take the tab, we're going to attach it to the other end over here. So we're just going to stick it in there. I'm going to match it. And what I'm going to do is I will go back to the sewing machine and baste this on at 1/8 of an inch. Baste these together because I don't need them to be separate when I attach them to the bag. All right, so I'm just going to clip them, go to the sewing machine, sew it at 1/8 of an inch. Once again, my 1/8 of an inch is the inside of my presser foot. I'm going to keep the same top stitching length because you're not going to see it. So I'm just going to use my top stitching length and I'm going to tack it in. I will be back tacking as I go forward and backwards. All right, and I've done one side. I'm just going to bring my other one right up here and do the same thing. Okay, so now that we've done that, we're ready to set this to the side. So I'm just going to snip a little bit of my threads and then set this to the side. If you're following along with me on the pattern, I'm on page 13, and we're going to talk about the top zipper closure. So you should have a zipper, and your zipper is going to be larger than your actual piece. So you can see that it's longer than my actual piece. It will be larger, and we will trim it down later. I also mentioned yesterday that I cut this wide so that we're now going to cut it in half. And we will have two sides. And that's because I want the center to actually meet or look like it's a complete picture. So what I will do is I will cut this in half. I've interfaced it, so make sure that it is interfaced. So you're interfacing only one piece and not two. All right, so now I have two pieces. My zipper is going to go right in the middle here, right? That's how it looks like a complete picture. So what I will do is I will flip one piece over, and I want to mark here that this is the top, or that's the inside. So I will mark that with a marker or a pen. And then I will flip it back over, and then I'll do the same on this side, just so I know which side the zipper goes on for myself. And then I will flip it back over. Okay, so now what's going to happen is we want that pocket to actually sit inside of the bag. So if I look at the bag itself, I want this to sit down inside of the bag. And so it has to meet over here on the corners. So I need to cut out a little notch so that that happens. When you cut that, it will be on the inside of the bag itself. So, or the top itself. So I've already done it on the lining. And what will happen is when we sew it, we're going to sew it like this, right? So those notches will be facing in towards the bag. So when we do this piece, we're going to cut the notch here. All right, so I hope that makes sense. I'll do one side first, and then I'll do the other side. So you can follow the directions, and I'm going to flip this over. It should be on the top, so my arrow's pointing up, so it should be on the corners that are the top. I'm going to measure this out. And you may not be able to see it, but I will measure this out and then cut it out. Sorry, I'm just looking for a pen. because I did have one. Okay. So I'm going to measure this out and then cut it out. And I'm going to do that on all, it'll be 2 on one and 2 on the other. And I'm just going to, once again, I'm going to double check. You don't want to cut it upside down. But hopefully you can see that green. There's a green line. You can see it right there. And this is my arrow over here. So it should be on the top. Or on the center, you know, the center line. So I'm going to do the same on this side. And then once I've done that, I'm going to do the same for the other piece as well. Okay. Right, so that's my center. I double check, right? I'm then going to flip this piece over as well. Once again, what's considered the center, that's where I'm going to make my marks and I'm going to cut. So don't do it on this side. This is the side that gets attached to the bag. We're going to do it on the side that gets attached to the zipper. It may seem kind of odd, but it will make sense, I promise. This is not square, so please don't, pay attention to the way that I explained to cut it in the pattern itself, because it is not a square corner. And give me 1 second. Let me get a pen. I don't know why I can't find a pen. I have tons of pens, but none of them that seem to write. Okay. Okay. So once we have those pieces cut, I'm just going to double check. So if I fold it over like this, right, my cutout's in the middle. If I fold it over like this, those pieces should match. So we're going to now cut them. I'm on page 14 of the pattern. And I will cut them out. And they should match the cutouts on the lining as well. All right, so that should be on the center. You can see my pattern is still continuous, and I will do the same on the other side. Okay. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to make a zipper sandwich. So you can see the pattern is it is continuous. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a zipper sandwich, because I want at the top, I want my lining, but underneath, I want my exterior, but underneath I want my lining. So I'm going to set one of these pieces to the side. I'm going to take my zipper and I'm going to take one of my exterior pieces. I will also need for this a piece of double-sided tape. You can use clips if you don't have double-sided tape, but I highly recommend double-sided tape. So I'm using 1/8 of an inch double-sided tape, and I'm going to add a piece on the fabric because it's shorter. This piece is shorter. I won't add it on the full length of that. And I'm adding it right along the edge. This is a low tack, so I never have really problems with it gumming up my machine needle. So open that up. And then you want to align it with the center of your zipper. So I'm going to fold, move my zipper pull out of the way. I'm going to fold my zipper in half. And I want to mark the back side because that's the part that I'm going to stick on here. So I'm going to fold that in half, just like this. And I'm going to make a little chalk line right there so that I know exactly where half is on my zipper. So I'm going to take my chalk marker and I'm just going to draw a little line. And I'm going to do it on the other side as well so I don't have to come back. All right, so once I've done that, then I'm ready to do it for my, install it on my piece. So I have two little chalk lines on either side which mark the center. You should also mark the center of your zipper, this zipper facing. So my center is right here, and I'm just going to draw a little line. I'm going to draw it on the tape. I should have drawn it on the back, but it's okay. I'm going to draw it on tape. And I'm going to match the center of my zipper with this center line here. Match the raw edges, and I'm going to push down so that that's in place. All right, so now everything is nicely aligned. Remember I said we're going to make a zipper sandwich or a sandwich with this. So the next piece that I'm going to need is I will need my lining piece. I'm going to, let's mark the center here, and I'm just going to fold it in half and do a snip. Here, you can mark it with your pen or your marking tool if you want to. I'm just going to take a scissor and take about 1/8 of an inch, a very small snip right here so I can see it creates a little triangle. And just because I know I'm probably going to come back, I'll do the same here. So when I attach it to the bag, I've also marked the center. Okay. Once we've done that, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to put a piece of tape once again on our piece, and then we're going to align it with our center mark right there that I can see my little chalk line. So I'm going to grab my double-sided tape, and I do like the 1/8 of an inch double-sided tape because my finished stitching is going to be 1/4 of an inch, so 1/8 of an inch keeps it out of the stitch line, so I don't have to peel anything back. If you use 1/4 of an inch, you have to be very careful, and you may have to peel some of that tape off, but the 1/8 of an inch, I don't have to do that. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to align my center mark here with my center line on my zipper tape and that raw edge of the zipper tape. So everything should line up when you're done. So your ends over here should line up. Over here it should line up. And I'm just double checking. All right, a little bit of a cutting, but everything lines up, right? So my cutout lines up, everything lines up. So I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and I'm going to stitch this now that it's together using 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. I'm going to change my stitch length to between a 3 and a 3.5. I like using a stitch length of 3. I'm using the edge of my zipper foot. The edge of my zipper foot is 1/4 of an inch. Look at your machine and measure it. You will be measuring from your needle to the edge here, and that should be 1/4 of an inch, right? So it's the distance from the needle to the edge of your fabric. I know some machines, I believe they're 3/8 of an inch. So just, measure it for yourself on your machine. I will be back tacking. I turned my stitch length to 3, and I'm going to start sewing. Okay. Try not to go over here. So I back tack, but I did not go on to the black zipper. It won't really matter that much, but it's a good habit to get into because for some projects, your stitching will show. So now that we've done that, I'm going to open that up I'm just going to finger press it real quick, but I'm going to open that up. And you can see that this is my lining, and when I flip it over, that's my exterior. I'm going to do the same on the other side, and then we're going to come back and we're going to do a little bit of top stitching before we complete this. So let's do the same thing. So I'm going to take my exterior fabric, mark the center. So I'll just fold it in half and mark the center. Once again, you can use a pen or marking tool. I'm just going to take a little snip, and I will do the same on the bottom as well. I'm going to do the same thing for my lining piece. So I will mark the center for my lining. And I just fold it in half and take a little snip. I will then get my double-sided tape. Once again, I'm attaching this bottom shorter end where I had to cut out. So that's where I'm going to put my tape. And let's do the same thing for our lining piece. I'll align the back first, only because that's where my chalk mark is. So I'll flip it over to the back. This should be face down. So on the back of your zipper, you're going to put your lining face down. I've marked the center. I'm going to put it face down on my zipper. And your ends should match, right? So when you're looking at this, the ends over here should match. So you know that you also have the center. And I'm going to just press that in place. You can use clips. If you want, you can use pins. Just make sure that if you're using pins, which I really don't recommend, it distorts the fabric a little bit, depending on how they're placed. So just be aware of that. And your zipper may not come out totally straight, meaning that there may be a wave in the zipper itself. All right. So now that I've done that, I can take my exterior and I'm going to put that face down as well on top. So I'm going to peel off that backing, lay it face down, aligning the centers so I can see the center of my back. And I'm aligning the center right there. And I'm aligning the raw edges. All right, and I'm pressing in place. So now I'm going to go to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew that once again at 1/4 inch seam allowance. Once again, I'm back tacking, being careful not to go onto that black zipper. Okay. Now what we're going to do is we are going to iron. We're going to open this up and we're going to iron it. So we want to iron it totally flat. And if you look at your pattern now, you can see that it's continuous, right? So if I turn it this way, it's more or less continuous. So you don't even notice that you took almost like 1/2 inch out of the middle. It is continuous. So let's iron this. And I want to make sure that when I'm ironing it, I'm matching up my lining and my exterior. So we want to make sure that we are doing that. so that we know that it's totally flat. And that's going to be important because when we top stitch along here, we want to make sure that we catch both the front and the back. So I give it a slight tug as well, just to make sure that I'm ironing it flat. If you're following along with me, we should be on page 15 of the pattern. So that's one side. I'm going to do the same with the other side. And we're going to iron this as well. Okay. Once we've ironed this, we're then going to top stitch it. So we're going to go back to the ironing, back to the sewing machine, and we're going to top stitch that along these edges, so that nothing becomes misaligned. I'm just going to stick a couple of clips, just a couple of clips over here, just to make sure when I get there, nothing shifts on me. So I'm aligning the lining with the exterior, and I'm just sticking some clips in there just to make sure. Even though I know I ironed it well, I don't want anything to bunch up or shift under there as I'm sewing it. Okay, so I will stitch along this edge, the folded edge, at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Change your stitch length to a 4, between a 4 and a 4.5, or whatever your stitch length is that you like. Okay. Drop my needle down right there on the corner, and I'm just going to stitch. I will back tack. I've done one side. I'm going to rotate it, and I'm going to do the other side. Okay. So it's actually very pretty. I use red thread on the bottom, so it's the same as on the top. And so there is that like contrast. Hopefully you can see that in there. But this is why I said to you, make sure you pull it, because if you don't pull it straight, what will happen is even when you stitch it, some of the lining may be a little higher or lower. And if you put the clips in, I know that nothing is going to shift. So now that we've sewn that together, the next thing we're going to do is make that little cup, right? We have that little cup effect that's going on. So I'm just going to rip my zipper off here a little bit and put it back on so I have a totally flat zipper when I do this. Okay. Hey, Andrea, how are you? For those of you who don't know Andrea Chapman, she started, and you can join her. She's over on Kajabi now, but she's doing a Studio 365, which is helping us get organized along with projects. And it's a good way to figure out what you have in your stash, and it's at your own pace. You can do what you want to do, but you can ask questions. It's a great community, and they're doing quilting blocks. I don't quilt, so I find that very interesting. I've done a couple. I'm hoping to get caught up, but each week there's a challenge. So for those of you who like to sew, check Andrea out. Andrea, if you want to, just stick your link right in here, and I will be sure to post it on the screen for everybody who wants to see it, as well as add it to the body when I'm done with my video. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to make this little dip in our piece. So to do that, and the dip that I'm referring to, and I mentioned that it's like a little, right here, it goes down, right? It's a little pocket in there. To do that, what we're going to do is we will take this and we're going to fold it. So when we fold it, what we're going to do is we're sort of making a little box corner here. It'll end up being like this, like a little box corner, right? But in order to make that happen very easily, we're going to take our lining piece. We're going to match those short ends. Those are the ends we didn't sew. And we're going to clip them in place on both sides. So we're going to do it here, and we're going to do it here. And then we're going to do the same thing with the exterior. We're going to match those short ends. And we're going to clip those. So what we're matching is we're putting right sides together for the exterior and right sides together for the lining. We're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to sew this at 1/4 of an inch. So we're going to sew these. It'll be four stitches, right? So the short ends, 1/4 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch with a stitch length of 3. So let's go there. Turn your stitch length down. I was top stitching before, remember, and I'm going to sew them. Tuck your zipper out of the way and back tack at the start and the stop. So I'm lowering my needle. And I'm not going to even cut that thread. I'm just going to take my other piece on the other side. I'm going to tuck it right underneath my sewing machine presser foot, and I'm going to keep going. Okay. I'll cut this, and I'll do the same thing. I'll cut them apart once I get back to the cutting mat. So I just want to make sure that they all align. And I'm going to just go back here because I didn't back tack and I don't want anything to come apart. Okay. So at the cutting mat, what we're going to do is I'm going to cut this apart and we're going to match these up. So we're kind of making a box corner in the middle of our zipper piece here, right? So we have these two pieces. They were right sides together. I'm going to open it up. And when you do that, you'll see that it lies flat and it creates a straight line like we would for a box corner. I'm going to go to this ironing board very quickly, and I will be opening up this seam because I want them to lie as flat as possible when I put this together. So I will be ironing those seams open. It's hard to nest them on the back of the zipper because normally I would nest them, but it is difficult to nest them because you can't really see them. And because the zipper has some thickness, it's also very hard to feel them through. So I'm going to open this up. Try not to create a permanent crease over here, but I'm going to open this up and I'm going to iron this seam open. So luckily I have my Olicio and it actually rises. I don't know if you hear the little squeak that happens, but I'm going to open this up. So it rises off of the cutting surface so you don't burn your cutting mat. So I'm just going to open that up. But once again, I'm not putting a crease here. I'm just opening up the seams. So I'm trying to be very careful as I hold it in place not to do that because I don't want a crease that I then have to get out of there. Yeah, Andrea, I actually had an Alicio before, and what happened was it started leaking. And so I went back to the Rowenta, and then when I decided I wanted, a house iron and a sewing iron, I went back and I treated myself to an Alicio when it was on sale. Hey, Miss Varna. Glad you were able to make it. I do have the smaller Alicio. It's like the really small one. I just find it doesn't work as well as this big one. So I'm still trying to figure out what types of projects it works on, because it doesn't have for me, it doesn't have as much, I guess, heat or steam power as a standard size Alicio. That's just my opinion. What do they say on social media? POV, point of view. So, and unfortunately, when I bought the smaller Alicio, it only came in purple, not yellow, and yellow is my favorite color. So when I got the big one, I just got my yellow. But it didn't come in. They didn't have it available, I should say. I'm sure it comes in yellow, but it wasn't available. So I bought the purple one. I also find that the smaller one, I have problems with it getting very hot. Like, it gets very hot if you leave it down. So you have to sit it up, but then I'm always afraid it's going to tip over. It's a whole thing. It's a whole thing. So I like the large one. So I'm just going to give this a quick press. So I've opened up those seams, I've ironed them open, and now I can do it. Now, if you've cut according to the directions, you will find that you will get a straight line. If you didn't cut according to the directions and it's a little off, you will then have to fiddle with it. But that's when I was saying earlier, it's not totally square. You're not cutting a square. All right. So once I've done that, I'm going to open this up. I'm just going to add some clips to the side. So I'm looking at my lining side for right now. Add some clip. Oh, that's so funny. So mine just stopped working. I did too. I too wish that the smaller one had an auto off, because I find that it gets hot. It gets very hot, even though it has that little Teflon mat. It gets very hot, and I'm always concerned about the surface that I'm ironing on, and that's why also I use on my cutting mat, I use an ironing board. I don't iron directly, because I tried that as well, and it warps your cutting mat. So yeah, it gets so hot, and it got so hot that at one point I touched it and I burnt myself. So you're absolutely right. I wish there was an auto off. Maybe we can write a suggestion. If we bombard them with that suggestion, they'll do it. Okay, so now I'm on the lining side. I mean the exterior side. And what you want to do is get this center seam here to align with the center of your zipper where it opens. And if you do that, when you pull this out, your corners over here should match, right? From your lining, it should match just like that. You're going to see how genius this is. And this is something you can do with any size, if you want to make it less shallow on the side. I made it very deep because I want to rest a pair of glasses in there when it's closed, because sometimes I go someplace and my glasses tint. And when I go inside, it's hard to see. And I can see without them, like big things, like at a distance. I just can't see close up. So I'll take them off and rest them in my bag right there on the top without opening up. And then, when the tint goes away, I put them back on. So I align that perfectly here. Flip it over, make sure. Yep. Align there, zipper straight. Everything's good. Right. And then once I've done one side, I'm going to go back to the other side and do the same thing. So just pull those corners out. Align it with your center where your zipper opens. You're going to clip this. You're going to flip it to the other side. So I have the exterior. If you have the lining, then flip it to the other side. Do the same thing here. you should have a straight edge going across here. And we're going to cut off that extra zipper. I'm then going to clip this, and I'm going to clip it on the side because I will be sewing along the top. Okay, so that's how it will look when you're done. We're going to stitch across the top using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Don't clip on the top because you'll have to remove them. So if you want to, you can, but clip on the sides, and that's how it will look. So let's go to our sewing machine and sew the bottom or the top, however you're looking at it. We're going to sew these seams, and we will be sewing the lining to the exterior. So they should be sewn together. 1/4 inch seam allowance with a stitch length of 3. I will be back tacking. I will be back tacking as I go till I get to the other side. Leave your clips in as long as possible if you're afraid that things will shift. All right. When you get to the zipper, so when you get here to the zipper, take your time. This is a nylon zipper, but please take your time because I have broken, and you may experience it as well, that you'll break a needle. If it hits it just the right way, you will break a needle. So take your time when you're going over that zipper. So that's one side. I'm going to do the same on the other side. 1/4 inch, stitch length of 3. Make sure everything lines up. Okay, and that's what it'll look like. I'm going to cut off these extra bits so that they're flush with the edge right here. And then you'll see the magic happen. So I'm taking my non-sewing scissors. I'm just going to cut this off. All right, so it should be, you're going to cut off that zipper. You don't need that. If you got the box, your zipper, you won't have as much excess zipper. I tried to give you, exactly to have a little bit extra, but not a lot. So now watch what happens. So when I take this and I flip my lining up, right, poke down those corners, and I do the same with the other side, and I poke down those corners, and I flip it over to the front, that's going to be the little pocket at the top of our bag. Thank you, Andrea. Yeah, the camera set was definitely something that it took a while for me to get. I actually have 3 cameras, and one day I'll have to show it. But I have a camera that's here. I have a camera in front of me here. So at the end of it, when I go back on screen, I have a camera here. And then I have one at my sewing machine. So they're all Logitech cameras. So I don't have any fancy cameras yet. So they're all Logitech, different brand, different types. And it makes it easy. I use a piece of software that allows me to quickly switch. It took a little while to learn it, but it allows me to very quickly switch the cameras, and I can do it as a one-woman show. So women can do a lot, women can do a lot. So as a one-woman show, I can switch my cameras and very seamlessly. And I use this little, I don't know if I could show you, this little thing. It's called a Stream Deck. And so I just use the little buttons. I know it's not sewing related, but if I push it, you'll see me. If I push it again, you'll see my sewing machine, and then you'll see my cutting mat. So I just, configuring all of that was also a little bit of a, ooh, how do I do that? But it was fun. I love tech. I hate and love tech at the same time. So it's a love-hate relationship. So we're going to, once we've done that, we're going to clip this. And I'm just going to pull this up just a little bit because it is kind of tight in there. But make sure you push that down. You will have some bulk here because of the zipper in the seam. So just push it down. And then what we're going to do is we will be top stitching this, not top stitching, I apologize. We'll be base stitching it all the way around. And you know that I like to base stitch. That way, when I'm putting the pieces together, I don't have to worry that I left something behind. Remember I said that? There are lots of times I've sewn my lining in and then I look in my lining and it folded under or something bizarre like that. So I'm going to add some little clips here. And I'm just doing that all the way around. Make sure that you push down because you'll have to pull that lining up. And I'm using a combination of little clips, right? Those little clips that we all know, the sewing clips, and then these binder clips that you can get from the office supply. So they all work. The office supply clips are a little bit harder to get off and they take a little bit more getting used to, but you can definitely use them. And then I have pin curl clips in here as well. So I've got all kinds of clips. Yeah, that it really helps. I don't know. Everybody streams or broadcasts differently. And I like the close-up, being able to show you guys all of the close-ups of what I'm doing so that, you know, sometimes you say, oh, do this, but you're like, oh, can I see it closer? And sometimes when you see the close-up, it really, really helps. All right, just a couple more clips. And then I'm going to go to my sewing machine at 1/8 of an inch. And I say use the longest stitch length on your sewing machine. And when I say that, you can absolutely use a stitch length of 3 or 4. I just think about if I want to rip it out, I don't want a shorter stitch. I'd prefer a longer stitch. So I use a stitch length of, mine goes up to a 6. But use the longest stitch length that you're comfortable with ripping out if you have to rip out. It's just a basting stitch, so I'm keeping it out of the seam allowance. So I'm basting at 1/8 of an inch. It doesn't really matter where you start. So you can start wherever you'd like. Just make sure that you get that. It can be difficult because it is a cup shape. So sometimes it's easier to start. I'll start here on the longer side. It's easier to start on the longer side than in that little short side. But when you start sewing, as you go around, just keep pulling it so that your fabric is straight right in here. So if, I know it's a curve, it's kind of curved, but if you keep pulling it so that this is always straight, it'll be easy to get around that curve. Once again, this is just to hold it together. So this is what I mean. So if you just pull your material this way, straighten it out, and you'll see that this is straight. I'm going around a curve, but I'm sewing straight. Okay, so now you can see, look at that. Everything's together, right? All the pieces are together. When I come back in with my 1/4 of an inch seam, you won't even see that basting stitch, but that's the cup. right? So that's going to be the top of our bag, and we're then going to add the sides and the lining to that. So we're going to set this to the side, and we're going to complete our exterior of our bag. And once we've done that, we will be done for tonight. And I will tell you exactly what pieces you will need for part 3 of this sew along, which will happen tomorrow night. So the exterior of your bag should be interfaced. So we should have, and I already started, you should have 2 pieces interfaced. We're going to need the 2 pieces for the exterior of the bag, and you will also need the foam. I use Annie Soft and Stable. I love the shape that it gives to the bag. It allows the bag to sit up on its own. The other thing that I find about Annie Soft and Stable, and this is the sew-in type, it does not have weight. It's very lightweight. Other products I found their foam has a little bit of a weight to it. This does not have any weight. And I find the sew-in works better because if you use the fusible type, what ends up happening is if it doesn't adhere, the glue doesn't melt, you will then see air pockets in your bag. This, because it's sew-in, you don't have to worry about that. Thank you so much, Andrea. So this was the fabric that was in the box for this bag, which is the Sikukuu. This was the fabric that was picked. Each month we have different fabric in a different bag. I picked this fabric because it reminded me of the holiday. All right. So like the reds and the greens and I think about like, it's good luck, Asian. I went to an Asian wedding and the invitations were red. And I found that meant good luck as well. So when you're doing your front and your back, you want to make sure that if you're using directional fabric, that directional fabric is in the direction that you want it to be. So make sure that you mark the top of your bag. And I put a little arrow here for my top so that when you're flipping it over, when you're cutting, that arrow should not be near you. It should be opposite to where you're cutting. So if you're following along in the directions, in the instructions, we're currently at page, and I'm not going to attach the strap. We'll do that tomorrow. I'm on page 18 of the pattern. So what I do is I want a little fold over here. And when I attach my foam, I'm going to be attaching, just in time for New Year's on Saturday. Exactly. And that's Chinese New Year. Those people are like, oh, it's over. Nope, Chinese New Year's coming up. When I attach this, I want to make sure that this foam doesn't go all the way to the top. So it's going to come down a little bit from the top, about 1/4 inch. And I want to be able to fold this over that foam. And the reason I'm doing that is because I don't want bulk. I don't want 2 layers of foam. If I went to the top here, when I fold it, I'd have 2 layers of foam. Because I want to keep this very domestic friendly, I want 1 layer of foam at that top seam. So what I did is I drew a line here, which is a 1/2 inch line. See that? And then I folded down that raw edge at the top to match that 1/2 inch line. So a little bit of a tip is I wanted a 1/4 inch fold over. So if I wanted a 1/4 inch, I double that. So 2 times 1/4 is a 1/2 inch. I drew the line at a 1/2 inch so that when I folded this to the line, it was a 1/4 inch. If you want a 1/2 inch fold over, it's 1/2 inch times 2. So you would draw a line at 1 inch. And when you folded the raw edge to the line, you'd have up here, you'd have a 1/2 inch. So I just give it a little 1/4 inch. That's going to be my seam line. And I know that my foam will not be in my seam line. So once I've done that, I ironed that for both pieces. The next thing I did was I marked my corner pieces here and I cut them out. So that's at the bottom. Once again, if it's directional fabric, make sure, double check that you're cutting it out at the bottom. So here goes one that I didn't cut out. All right. So that's going to be my bottom. And I'm just going to cut this out. And the measurements are in the pattern itself. And I'm just going to cut that out. All right. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to take both of our pieces of fabric, right, our front and our back. We're going to put them right sides together. I'm going to clip them in place. And then I'm just going to sew at the bottom. You're gonna see how quickly this comes. Well, it comes along quickly because I did some free work, right? But we're going to align the bottoms. So I want to make sure they're all aligned. And I'm clipping the sides, but you can definitely clip across the bottom. I just want to make sure that they do not shift. This does not shift on me. And I'm going to stitch a 1/4 inch seam allowance at the bottom. So the top will be open, the sides will be open. Just stitch it at the bottom. Once again, turn your stitch length down to 3. Remember, we were doing our basting stitch earlier, so we don't want to have a basting stitch. We want a stitch length of between 3 and 3.5. It depends on, which one you'd like. I use a 3. And then I'm just going to sew. I'm going to back tack at the start and the stop. Okay. Once I've done that, I'm going to open this up and I'm going to give that seam. I'm going to open up that seam at the bottom. All right. But if you look at my fabric, it's all, all the little leaf pieces or wheat shafts are pointing down. I want this to appear at the top of my bag. So I'm going to grab my ironing board. I'm going to open this seam up and I'm going to iron it flat. So I don't want any bulk at the bottom of that of my bag, so that's why I'm opening it up. I'm not ironing it. I'm not ironing it to the left or the right. I want it totally flat. All right, so you're going to iron that open, just like that. All right, now we're going to grab our foam. So I'm going to grab my foam. I'm going to lay my piece of foam right on here. I'm not worrying too much about the top. I'm going to come back and cut that later. But I do want to make sure you can see it. I have excess at the side. So I'm going to trim this down to about maybe 1/4 inch on either side because I want to be able to clip it. So I'm going to cut this down on either side about 1/4 inch, but I do want excess. And the reason I have the excess is to give me wiggle room in case things shift. I am not, so I'm just cutting this straight up. And then once I've done that, then I will cut it so that the top fits. So I'm going to do this. And don't throw away these scraps. These are great for if you're going to make a strap and you want to make it a little pattern. You can zigzag stitch these together and make and put it inside your straps. So don't throw those away. Now I want to make sure they're the same size that I need for my my piece here. So I can see, and you should cut this to the measurements that are in the pattern. So I'm just going to cut this here, but cut it to the measurement that's in the pattern because it gives it to you. I have my fold over. I'm doing something you probably shouldn't do. And I'm just going to eyeball it. Make sure if you ever do this, make sure you don't cut your fabric at the top. But I know that I'm away from it, so I'm good. But cut it. The dimensions for your foam that you need are in your pattern. So cut it to that dimension and it should sit right inside the bag the way it needs to sit under your fold line. Okay. And when we put this together, we want to make sure that we open this top fold because we don't want to stitch it with the fold down. We want to stitch it with it up. So I'll show you exactly what I mean. All right. So So once you have this the same size, I'm going to flatten it. I'm going to flip it to the wrong side. If I unfold this edge, I'm going to take this and stick it right there. Can you see that? It's right at the fold line. I don't want it going up to the top, and I want to make sure when I stitch, this is unfolded. You don't want to stitch it flat because when we have to put the bag together, we want to make sure that it's a clean finish. So I'm going to clip this in place at the top, and then I'm going to clip the sides. I'm not worried about that cutout right now. I'm going to come back later on and cut it out after I've sewn it. All right, so remember this, we're going to come back later after we stitch it together, and it should fold over nicely at the top. So I'm going to clip it just like that. All right, and I should be able to do the same on this side as well. I should be able to tuck it right in there just like that, and I should be able to clip it. And it is a tad long, so I'm just going to trim it just a little bit. The other nice thing about this foam is that you can stretch it a little bit, so if it doesn't quite fit something, just pull it. It's totally fine. It won't create puckers, and you can just pull it. So I'm just going to trim this. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is it fits right nicely in there. So then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to clip it like I did the other side, and then I will clip the sides. I will smooth it out and clip the sides as well. I am going to baste the foam on, but before I baste the foam on, I want to add 2 extra stitch lines to this, and that's because I don't want my foam, I don't know how to explain it. I don't want it lifting. I want to minimize how much it lifts and shifts in there. So what I'm going to do is I am going to stitch. So now it's totally smooth. I'm going to stitch on either side of this center line at either 1/4 or 1/8 of an inch, whatever you're comfortable with, because I know this is all new to people. So whatever you're comfortable with, on the center line, stitch a line to the left and to the right, at whatever you're comfortable with. Like I said, because it's new to people, and some of you may be learning how to just stitch a straight line, it may not be comfortable. I'm going to use, the pattern calls for, I believe, 1/4 of an inch. So I will be using that. You can use 1/8 of an inch, but I want to lock down the foam as much as I can. So once again, this is sew and foam. I'm just going to add a clip on either side here. I mean, it's totally flat, so it doesn't matter, but just, it's always good. More clips is fine. Whatever you need to put on here to keep it flat. And now you can see why I trimmed it. So when I sew this, I'm going to sew around the entire piece. So the first thing I'm going to do is sew 1/4 of an inch lines to the left and the right. And then I'm going to base this entire piece down. So I'm going to follow all of those lines and base it down. Remember, when you baste, and I'll repeat this again, that top seam should be up. So you should have the raw edge. Do not fold it down because you're going to have to unpick it later, I promise you. So make sure that it's folded up, or it's unfolded, I should say. So the first thing is 1/4 of an inch seam. Then after that, I will stitch all the way around the raw edges with a basting stitch to lock it down. It is the best. I've heard about it so much, Anti-Soft and Stable, and I never sewed with it. And then one day I said, oh, I kept hearing about it. I said, let me try it. It is my absolute favorite, So for those of you who order the box, you'll see it's always in there. So, and I always mention why I use it, because somebody says, why don't you use this product? And I said, because. And your bags look so nice. They look so nice. And I would use it with a vinyl bag or a leather bag. Sometimes I use a little bit of leather, but a vinyl bag, if it calls for foam, I will definitely use Anti-Soft and Stable for that as well. So we're going to turn our stitch length down. This will be a top stitch length, so I'm going to turn it to 4. And then once I turn it to 4, it's like it got a little brighter in here, didn't it? There we go. Oops. Let's see if we can get a little bit less light on this subject here. I don't know if it's me or but it seemed to have gotten a little bit brighter. So let's get it a little bit not as bright so you can actually see what I'm doing. So it's not as bright for you guys. Okay. I don't know why it didn't get any darker here. I promise you it's still night. Let's see. So I'm just trying to get this stretch a little bit. So hopefully that's better. I don't know, my lighting all of a sudden it changed. So what I'm going to do is I will stitch on either side of that line. Just trying to get this out of the way. I don't know about you guys, but that's really driving me crazy. There we go. I think that's good. Okay. I'm stitching on either side of this line. And so at 1/4 of an inch. Once again, if your presser foot is 3/8 of an inch, it's okay. You could do 3/8 of an inch. It's just locking it down. Stitch length at a 4. And then what we're going to do is after we're done, like I said, we're going to go around the entire bag. All right. I do back tack. One thing I should mention too is as long as your bag is flat where you're sewing it, in the throat over here, I have to fold up my bag just so that I can, it'll move smoothly because it is a little bit larger, but just make sure the part that you're sewing is flat. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to baste around the entire bag. I don't know, that lighting. Does it bother anybody as much as it bothers me, or am I just being, but it's just not making me happy. There we go. Oh, finally. Okay. There we go. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch around the entire bag. Once again, make sure that that piece is unfolded. I'm going to use 1/8 of an inch, which means I have, it's going to be a basting stitch, which means I have to change my stitch length to the longest stitch length or whatever stitch length you're comfortable with. I want to also mention, because you basted right here in the middle, it will help your bag, because it'll help the piece, the top piece to stay where it is and the bottom to stay where it is. So let's stitch that 1/8 of an inch all the way around. Get in the habit when you get to the corners of rotating your wheel so that needle goes up. That will help eliminate that jogging. You know, when you get that angular stitch that goes like this and you're like, oh, I messed up. So if you get in the habit of turning it so that that needle goes up, it makes it so much easier. And in this case, it doesn't really matter, as it doesn't matter about it, but if you get in the habit of doing it, because you're not going to see the stitch, but if you do it for like a strap or you're doing it for anything where you have sharp corners, that habit comes in very handy. So you're not going to take it out of the fabric, you're just going to lift it. And that ensures that your top thread has caught your bobbin thread. Okay, thank you. Does it look better now, Arnetta? I adjusted it, so hopefully it should look better. You should be able to see it better. I don't know. All of a sudden, it's like the lighting changed in the room. I didn't do anything different, but it did change somewhat. So hopefully I've gotten a better, you can actually see it a little bit better. Okay. Thank you. Hopefully it looks better. I'm trying to keep an eye on YouTube and here as well. Okay. So I'm going to stitch this way. And once I've done one side, I'm just going to come back and do the other side. Once again, remember when you get to that bottom piece, make sure that that's unfolded. So that's one half of my bag, and I'm going to do the other half of the bag the same way. So on the other side of the bag. Okay. So just when you think, thank you, Andrea. Just when you think you got your tech mastered, you don't. It does weird and bizarre things. So I've stitched around the entire piece. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this out to the seam line, to the actual exterior of the fabric. So I'm just going to cut this out. You can use a rotary cutter. I'm just going to use these scissors just to make sure I don't overcut anything. And like I said, I left this piece of foam in just in case things shift. I hate when things shift and you don't catch the piece that you need. I base this because like I said, I have had times when something has folded up in the bag and I'm all done, and then I look at it and I didn't catch my fabric. So we're almost done. Okay, so we have that part done. And what we're going to do now is we're going to fold the bag in half and we're going to sew the side. So that's what it should look like when you're done, right? It's basted in, everything's being held together, and we don't have to worry about losing any pieces. So we're going to fold this in half. We're going to match the top edges. So we're going to be right sides together, guys. So to make sure these are right sides together. I'm going to clip the sides. That's where I'm going to sew. Once again, make sure that that top seam is unfolded. I'm going to clip the bottom. I'm going to fold the bottom in half right here. And I'm going to put a little snip because I need to know where my center line is when I come back around to box my corner. So I'm just going to put a little snip right here so I can see it for myself. Fold it. Make sure you press it hard so you know where your center line, your seam is. And you'll be able to see it, but you know, it's always good to have a little bit extra measurements if you need it. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to sew down the sides. So I'm going to sew on the left and the right sides. Make sure that everything matches. All right. And I'm going to use 1/4 inch seam allowance on both sides. Back tack at the bottom and the top. Turn your stitch length down to a 3 or 3.5, whatever you're comfortable with. And that's one side. We're going to do the other side. The other thing about Anti-Soft and Stable is that it compresses very nicely under your sewing foot. Okay. Last but not least, we're going to open this up, right? So that's my piece sewn together. We're going to stick our hand inside the bag. We're going to push. Make sure you're inside both of, the lining piece, the exterior pieces. Fold it like this. It should make a square. So when you're done, there should be a square here. Look for your center mark. If you can't find it, you can always just peek in here and you can see your center seam where you stitch the bottom together, and you can use that. I'm going to open up my seam here, match it up to the center, and I will clip it in place. Right there at the center. You can see there's a straight line. I'm going to do another clip here on the side and another clip here. So it should be totally straight. There should be a straight line. All right. We're going to do the same with the other side. So we're going to open this up. We're going to open this seam up. We're going to match this seam with the center mark. If you can't see the snip, look for your seam right here. There's a seam right over here at the bottom, and you can match those two seams up. I clip it in place. And we're going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance, so then it'll look like that. We're going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance to stitch the bottom closed, the bottom corner closed. It should still be at a stitch length of 3 because we're not changing anything there. 1/4 inch seam allowance. Make sure that we keep this this open, that seam open when we get to it, and I'm going to back tack. Take your time. Okay, and we're done with that. So just to give you a little bit of an overview, that's our bag, right? So if I turn it right side out, so I normally start at a corner and I poke that corner first, and I grab a fistful of the bag and I flip it right side out. Poke out those corners. Give you a little bit of a preview about what it's going to look like. You're going to fold this edge over, right? When we're done, we're going to fold that over just like that. But the piece that we did earlier, where I said it looks like a little cup, this is our cup piece. This is going to sit right in there. So when you're trying to think, how is this going to work? It's going to sit right in there. And then we're going to put in our lining. We're going to put on our straps, but it's going to sit right in here. It'll fit perfectly right in here. That's why if we look at the bag itself, this is the cup piece, right? So the exterior we did, the little cup piece that we did, and once we attach it, you'll be able to pull it up or pop it up. Thank you, Andrea. And I'm gonna quote you. My friends tell me, "Oh, you don't know anything." I'm gonna say, Andrea said, "I'm brilliant." She said, "I'm brilliant." The nice thing about this this technique is that if you don't want it, like I was saying, if you don't want it as deep, you can change the cutout piece, right? So the piece that I cut out, my goal was to make it easy for everybody, because if I made it less shallow, I didn't want to make it too fiddly. But what I did mention on day one is if you look at it, it looks almost square because it's sort of like taking the bottom of your bag here and dipping it down, right? So if I push this down, it would be the same as if I did here. Okay. Every bag I do, you learn something new. There's a new technique. And you should be able to apply it to other bags. And it should be something that you want to try to figure out how you can do with something else, right? So now that you've seen this, it's something you say, well, maybe I can try this on another bag. It looks very simple on the surface, but it's a little bit of a twist here. So this is where we are. We've completed the exterior. We finished our straps. We will be attaching those tomorrow. Let's talk about what we will need for day 3 as far as pieces are concerned. So we will need our lining piece, right? So we need to have the pieces that we need for our lining. And I explained that the lining pieces are going to be constructed. It's 2 different sides, but you're going to have 2 pieces on either side of one center accent piece on the inside of the bag, right? So it'll look like this. And we're going to make 2 of these, right? One of them is going to have a zipper. So we're going to put a zipper on one side. So there will be a zipper pocket. You will need the zipper pocket pieces. So I promise you I have them, but you'll need the zipper pocket pieces as well. And then in addition to that, on the other side of the bag, we're going to create card slots. So you'll need the little pieces that you cut. I talked about this on day 1. You're going to stabilize them with Decoville Light, and we're going to create card slots on the other side. So one side will be a zipper pocket and the other side will be card slots, and we'll have 5 of them on the inside of the bag. So for tomorrow, prepare your card slots, prepare your piecing, add your interfacing, and everything according to the directions so that you're ready to construct the lining and you're ready to put it all together. You will also need, for the zipper part, you will also need a zipper facing piece. And that was a small strip that I said we would use to help stabilize the zipper pocket. And when we stabilize that pocket, it also gives us something to grab onto when we're doing the zipper, when we're installing the zipper pocket. So that's for tomorrow night. Or that's for actually day 3, because day 3 may not be tomorrow night for some people, depending on, how you look at the videos. I thoroughly enjoyed being with you guys tonight. I really, really appreciate everybody who has joined me. If you've watched it on replay, feel free to ask questions. I will come in and answer your questions. I'm hoping that I covered the pattern enough that everybody understands exactly what they need to do. I'm happy also, Andrea. I'm so happy that you were able to catch me. If there's any questions, feel free to ask. If you've purchased the pattern, please come join us in the Sew Your Bag Facebook group. This is the Sikukuu bag. If you've purchased any of the patterns, even if you got the free pattern, join us in the group and ask questions. Very helpful group. If you want to see more of this content, or you want to keep up when I do these sew-alongs, and I do them for every single box that I do, every single pattern that I do, please hit the subscribe button. It costs you nothing. It's totally free. Just hit subscribe. It's just a way to get notified, and you'll get notified whenever I do these sew-alongs. I've appreciated each of you tonight for taking time out of your schedule and away from your families. And I wish you a good night, and we will speak again on day 3. Have a good evening.